Take your mind into the wonderful world of physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual wellness. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kinetic Hour. Conversations with you and guests. With your host, Kenan Wesley Mason. That's me. All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another edition of the Kinetic Hour. I am your host, Kenan Wesley Mason. Welcome one, welcome all, and thank you for tuning in. Go to my YouTube channels. As always, there's two. One is right here, the Kinetic Hour, and that's Kennetic. And the other is Kinetic Fit and Wellness Info. Once again, Kennetic. Kinetic Fit and Wellness Info for everything health related, mental health, physical health, you name it, it's all there. And again, right here, the Kinetic Hour. As we are streaming live, on Instagram, streaming live on Facebook, and streaming live on LinkedIn. So welcome, as always, whether it's one person or 1,000 people watching now or 5 years from now, my voice will continue to permeate. So thank you for tuning in. Subscribe. Tell everyone that you know to subscribe. Leave your comments. Click thumbs up. Click the notifications so you'll know every time that I'm about to come on. I haven't posted anything live for a couple of weeks, which I'll talk about maybe the next episode, since we're heading towards the end of the year and into the new year. So thank you to everyone. For this episode, I'm going to wrap up a series. I've been doing two series, actually, health related. This series that I'm going to wrap up is about mental health. And I've been, if you've gone to my YouTube channel, you've seen that I've done a few episodes related to ADD and ADHD. So what I'm going to do is wrap up this series by putting up the rest of the potential root causes, because I have an article here, ADHD causes, myths and facts. And I've been going over many of the potential root causes of ADD and ADHD. Well, we've gone through pesticides, we've gone through smoking and drinking during pregnancy. We've gone through food additives, which I showed a clip of the protests about a month back at the Kellogg's Corporation. I believe they're in Michigan. What else we have here? Sugar, which is, again, probably some people may argue or debate the facts or statistics. But sugar, I don't think anyone would argue that sugar is one of the most, if not the most addicting substance on the planet. Sugar, because it's in everything in varying forms, whether it's sugar from the sugar cane, converted sugar from high fructose corn syrup or corn sugar, all of your artificial sweeteners. What else do we have? TV and video games, and bad parenting. So I'm going to go and wrap up the final potential causes of ADD and ADHD. So I'm going to put this first. I'm going to put this on the screen here. because whether you're a child or an adult, it really doesn't matter. Uh, Many people have been diagnosed with having attention deficits, attention deficits. and and it's been having an effect on the behaviors of children. And because the root causes haven't been addressed, many times the behaviors cross over into adulthood, having deficits or having hyperactivity within your attention deficits, or you're having an attention deficit because you're hyper. So this next one here is brain injury. Brain injury. So for brain injury, says brain injury that results from a serious blow to the head, a brain tumor, a stroke, or disease can cause problems with inattention and poor regulation of motor activity and impulses. And according to the National Institute of Mental Health, children who have suffered certain types of brain trauma may show symptoms similar to ADHD. But because only a small portion of children with ADHD have suffered a traumatic brain injury, it's not considered a major risk factor. It's not considered a major risk factor because brain injury can apply to anyone, whether you have ADHD or not. So what it's saying here is that brain injury wouldn't be a total contributing factor of what creates ADHD, but it's not totally put off the table as a potential root cause, which is why it's labeled here, brain injury. So there's really nothing to add to that. That's one of the potential root causes of ADHD. So I'm going to take that down. And I'm going to bring the next one up here because this is a big one. Right here, I'm going to pull this one up here. Diet. And because we've been talking about food additives and sugar, so we're going to talk about diet just from a broad scope. Although it was once popularly believed that food allergies or sensitivities cause ADHD, the research so far has been unable to support the idea that diet displays a significant role in ADHD. Still, certain dietary components may affect behavior. And a recent Australian study suggested that adolescents with diets high in fat, refined sugar, and sodium were 2 times as likely to be diagnosed with ADHD as other kids. Additional studies have also linked diets deficient in omega-3 fatty acids, which are important for brain development and function, to ADHD symptoms. So diet, and as you can see right here, links to fatty acid deficiencies. Fatty acid deficiencies, because the brain is made of fat. The brain is made of fat, housed in water, conducting electricity. That's the brain. That's the brain. And if we're feeding the brain processed sugar, diets high in processed fat or animal fat, or substances that convert into fat, all the hydrogenation of your food. Refined sugar and sodium. Refined sugar and sodium, or table salt, or any other artificial or highly processed salt substances. So the Australian study suggests that adolescents with diets high in fat, refined sugar, refined sodium are 2 times as likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. So, solution: eat more foods that have omega-3 fatty acids, or just eat more foods that are as close to nature as possible. That's as close to nature as possible. And for children, since children love food, colorful foods, I mean, children are attracted to color, or the colors of the light spectrum, which is why the whole Kellogg's, which is why the whole Kellogg's, the whole Kellogg's debate is on the table, with the food dyes and the colors that attract the brains of children. So, a certain diet has to be introduced to the child early in age so they can get used to the idea of eating more healthy or nutrient-dense food on a regular basis. Because if not, the total opposite will occur. They will have foods that are high or highly processed, that has the refined sugar, the refined salt, and anything else that's refined. So, diet. We can start with fruit, whatever fruits that you're introducing to your child, because when their teeth come into play and their teeth start growing in at young ages, you can introduce them to soft fruits if you choose, or as they get older. But whatever fruits that you want to introduce to keep the internal tract moving at its at its normal pace, or pace of normalcy, or at a functional pace where they can get the most absorption of nutrients to the cells and to the brain so the body as a whole can function accordingly. So all your fruits that you may want to introduce, plums, pears, peaches, apricots, you name it, dates are good. Dates are good. So yeah, any of your fruits that you want to introduce, mangoes, anything that's close to nature as possible, not frozen fruit or canned fruit, not frozen or canned, because they have to have preservatives for shelf life, and for shipping purposes as well, because many of your canned fruits and vegetables and frozen fruits and vegetables are shipped, whether cross country or overseas. So they have to have a shelf life, which means that preservatives have to be put into the food, preservatives, and into the packaging, So a diet that's high in nutrients. If your children eat meat or animal flesh, make sure it's the cleanest that you can get, preferably organic. Chicken, grass-fed beef from cows that actually roam free in the fields, not cows that are cooped up side by side and fed grass, just like they're fed grain and corn in your commercial producing facilities. So so grass-fed cows, vegetarian-fed chicken, or organically, or what they call cage-free, where they get to roam freely as nature intended. And so when you eat this, you get the cleanest of animal flesh possible, without all the fear hormones and stress hormones during slaughter, which occurs in your commercial facilities. Fear. So when you eat a diet full of fear hormones from the cow or calf that knows what's coming, they know, they can sense it. Fear and stress saturate the muscles. So when you eat this is what you get, which causes behavior changes over time. It just does. Oh gosh. So for your children, for parents, for your children, do the best that you can to give and you don't have to be perfect, but just do the best that you can to give your children the best possible opportunity for better development, especially brain development. Foods that are high in fat, sweet potatoes, avocados, they're great. And we can all acquire a palate for all of those, for all of them. And then you just do what you like as you develop, as your child develops. But at least introduce them to this type of diet or dietary lifestyle, or introduce it to them early. So it's not a tug of war trying to get them to eat their fruits and vegetables. They'll want them willingly when you introduce it to them as something that's good for them. Diet. So I'm going to come out of here and I'm going to go to the next one. But diet is important. It's probably one of the most important. So I'm going to come out of there and I'm going to go to this next one. I'm going to go to this next one here because a lot of people go this route as a potential root cause of attention deficit hyperactivity. Some people say it's in the genes. It's my genetics. I inherited ADHD. I inherited it from my parents or grandparents. It's in my genes, right? We want to blame our genetics. So as it reads, the evidence strongly suggests that ADHD is passed down from parents, not parenting style. There is a very strong inheritability to ADHD. Quote, it may be one of the most inheritable psychiatric disorders. In fact, a child with ADHD is 4 times as likely to have had a relative who was also diagnosed with ADHD, and results from studies of multiple twins indicate that ADHD often runs in families. Ongoing research is looking to pinpoint the genes responsible for ADHD. A new study by scientists at Cardiff University in Wales found that children with ADHD are more likely to have missing or duplicated segments of DNA. So genetics. Well, some of that may be true. Actually, not even some of it, because all of us, all human beings, inherit personality traits and demeanor traits and interaction traits from their parents, because the parent is the first teacher. The parent, typically, unless they're adopted at birth, then they have their new respective new parents. But generally speaking, children first mimic their parents first by way of the DNA, genetic chromosomes that are passed from the parents through conception. And so whoever, and I've said this over and over again, whoever your parents were at the time of conception, whatever their personality was at the time of conception, whatever knowledge they acquired during conception, whatever past adversities they may have had during conception, all of it is transferred to the new infant, the new egg that's being fertilized. So when the child is born, they already have the divine blending of the mother and father's DNA, genetic traits. So yes, genetics does play a role in the behavior patterns of all of us. All of us, whether we're diagnosed with ADHD or not, all of us have the inherited characteristics of our parents to varying degrees. At the same time, all of us can change our patterns. Our patterns. All of us can change our behavior patterns. None of us have to, especially if our parents happen to have certain patterns about themselves that don't correspond or correlate with how you want to navigate through your life journey. And so you can change them. You can change them. All of us have the potential to change. All of us. If we see something that's not conducive, or if we start to become self-aware to something that's not conducive to how we want to become our best selves in life, then we can change it. We can change it. We can alter it. We can alter it to where it fits for us, so we can have an easier time in life throughout our life journey. Because nothing has to run in the family for a lifetime. I've said this over and over again. Nothing has to run in the family. All of us come into this world with a standard pattern based on our parents, again, at the time of conception. But as we become more aware of our surroundings and our circumstances and our environment, if it doesn't make us feel good on a regular basis, then we can change it. We can change it. We don't have to be diagnosed with having a hyperactive attention deficit and then calling it a disorder, because just that alone that's going to change how our genetics function. It's going to change how our DNA functions and how our DNA interacts with our entire being. Our entire being. So genes and our genetic coding, you can always change it. You can change it. You can create, because we're all creators by nature. So we can create a new pattern for ourselves. We can create it and alter the pattern that was given to us by our parents. We can alter it, still keeping the essence of what they've brought to our table, but we can make some slight alterations and patterns that will cater more to us as individuals. So you can change your genetic coding. You can change it by way of your changed thoughts and feelings about you and about life and about others. You can change it so your reality changes around you. Genetics. Genetics. Oh gosh. What else is next as I as I come out of there? It's the genes' fault that I'm so dysfunctional. Well, you can change that. Change it. Take the initiative and change it, because we all have the wherewithal to do so. Next, on the table as a potential root cause of attention deficit hyperactivity, without the use of the word disorder. You know, because again, the moment you start using that term, all words have energy attached to them. All words have energy attached to them. And the moment you start using the word disorder, it's going to change the chemistry in your brain. That's just what it does. Next, overdiagnosis. Overdiagnosis. Because there's no objective ADHD tests, parents, doctors, and educators continue to debate over whether ADHD is overdiagnosed. Some say doctors are too quick to diagnose a child's behavior problems as ADHD without considering other possible causes. North Carolina State University researchers found that children who are several months younger than their peers could be mistakenly diagnosed with ADHD when, in fact, they are just less mature than their classmates. Nonetheless, according to Walrek, quote, most of the evidence is that ADHD is underdiagnosed and undertreated. And so the debate goes, just like the debate on whether we're going to call it ADD or ADHD, which I read to you. The terms have been interchangeable due to how different psychologists and different psychiatrists, how they interpret attention deficit, or how they interpret behavior, how they filter behavior or behavior patterns. And so their attention or their behaviors are misdiagnosed, because a younger child may have a different behavior pattern than their peers. They just haven't matured yet. They haven't become more self-aware. That's not a disorder. That's their standard development for them, for that specific individual, not a disorder. But we're quick to diagnose, because the moment you diagnose with one of these labels, as in the diagnosis, what is it called? The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, where over 900 pages of diagnoses, mental diagnoses. So they can show it to the insurance company so the physicians get paid. This is why a lot of the school systems are quick to diagnose children with having ADHD in the public school system. This is why so many children are diagnosed or misdiagnosed, because they have a behavior that the teachers or the faculty believe that is out of the norm, whatever that is. If their behavior is out of the norm of this group over here, and their behavior is a little more over the top, that means automatically by default they have a disorder. And then they're going to prescribe Ritalin, right? The childhood crack, the childhood cocaine, Ritalin. North Carolina State University researchers found that children who are several times younger than their peers could be mistakenly diagnosed with ADHD when, in fact, they are just less mature than their classmates. They haven't developed completely yet. But we're going to diagnose them as having ADHD when they're not even fully developed, right? They're in their adolescent years. They're 12, they're 13. And you're going to cast this label upon them during their adolescent years and mold and shape their brain pattern through a diagnosis, telling them that there's something wrong with them because their behavior is different. Overdiagnosis. Overdiagnosis. So for the parents, don't allow the school system to diagnose your children, because once they do, you may have an uphill battle between you and the school system and whether you're a sufficient parent or not. That's what's going to be in question. Overdiagnosis. So just be cautious with that, because ADHD has been overdiagnosed. It has been. And many children, again, as I said earlier, many children are diagnosed with this and it boils over into their adulthood. And it creates difficulties and adversities with their social life, possibly, and how they interact with people, how people interact with them. It can create adversities, and it can create self-esteem and self-value challenges for the individual, because they've had this disorder diagnosis cast upon them during their teenage years when they're just learning about themselves and who they are as individuals. Overdiagnosis as a potential root cause of ADHD. Oh gosh. I think we have one more here. So I'm going to pull this up here. Yeah, I think this is the last one here. This one right here. Chemical exposure. Chemical exposure. Well, what kind of chemicals are we referring to? While smoking, alcohol, and pesticides may be a problem, researchers are looking at other toxins too. For instance, Boston University School of Public Health researchers found a link between fluorochemical chemicals, industrial compounds widely used in products like stain-resistant coatings and food packaging. And ADHD. Oh gosh. Phthalates. Phthalates. I think that's how you pronounce that. Found in items like toys, food packaging, and cosmetics have also been linked to ADHD. But as with many factors, the evidence points only to a correlation and can't prove that these chemicals contribute to ADHD. Of course. And many of these are what's called polyfluoroalkyl chemicals. These are the chemicals used in everyday packaging and products. Just like it says here, stain-resistant coating. Stain-resistant coating. And food packaging, it's in food packaging. Chemical exposure. Now, this line right here it says can't prove that these chemicals contribute to ADHD, and that's always going to be the talking point. That the chemicals, it's not the chemicals' fault. I mean, anything that the body recognizes as a foreign substance, it's going to attack and do everything that it can to get rid of these foreign substances or foreign objects, because the body only has affinity to what it can use as an energy source from the fruits and the vegetables and the grass-fed cows and the chickens. Nutrient density. That's what the body is craving for, not chemical exposure from all the pesticides and the herbicides that are sprayed over the fields every other day. Right? I won't even get into the chemtrails that hover above cities all over the world, especially here in America. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. The chemtrails, chemical exposure. Here in Los Angeles, I mean, the smog levels are off the charts, right? Because of all the exhaust from the fumes of using gas-powered cars, oil-powered cars, giving off exhaust fumes. They're floating in the air, in the atmosphere. I mean, you can see this stuff from afar. You can see it. You can see the smog. That's chemical exposure. That's chemical exposure. If you live near any nuclear plants, you know, we've heard of 3 Mile Island and all these places, you know, Chernobyl. I mean, if you live near these areas, chemical exposure. And they do cause adversities in the body, right? You know, cancers, right? Leukemia, blood cancers, you name it, lung cancer, chemical exposure. Not just cigarettes and alcohol, not those chemicals. We're talking about just chemicals that float in the wind. Chemical exposure. So all of these are food. Look at it, food packaging. I mean, these things are in toys, food packaging, and cosmetics. And we know certain cosmetics have been recalled because of chemical exposure. We know certain toys have been recalled because of chemical exposure. We know that certain foods have been recalled because of chemical exposure. But we can't prove that these chemicals contribute to ADHD. But they're always being recalled. The potential causes of ADD and ADHD. Chemical exposure. So just to summarize as I come out of here. So, oh gosh, just to summarize, no one has to be diagnosed with an attention deficit. No one has to be diagnosed. No child has to be diagnosed with an attention deficit. I mean, all children, just by nature, they want to explore. They want to explore. And some children are restless. Many children are restless because the last thing that they want to do is be grouped up with 30 other children for hours and hours at a time, right? And you can't move, you can't talk, you can't do anything. All you have to do is just sit there and watch the teacher and try to get some kind of amusement or recreation within the learning experience. But if that's not happening, then we're going to call it you have an attention deficit. because you can't pay attention long enough, child. Right? So we're going to diagnose you as having a disorder because you're not paying attention long enough to understand what the daily lessons are. So we know brain injury is off the table. Diet is a big one. Diet. What you feed your children. You know, the old saying, we are what we eat. Well, if our children are being exposed early to chemicals, then we're going to start to behave according to how those chemicals create a reaction or a response within the body. So diet is important. Um, Raw fruits and vegetables, organic, preferably. Do the best that you can. For those that eat meat, grass-fed beef, vegetarian-fed chicken, preferably. Wild-caught fish, preferably. No tilapia, no farm-raised catfish. No, those don't come from nature. Those are Frankenfish. Genes. You can change your genetics by way of changing your thinking patterns. By way of changing your thinking patterns and the way you feel about your new thinking patterns. Changing your thoughts and your feelings about your thoughts, which will eventually change your environment. So you can change your genetics. Nothing has to run in the family for a lifetime. The generational patterns don't have to be. Overdiagnosis. Overdiagnosis, which is pretty prevalent right now. Overdiagnosis, because this child has less of an attention than this next child that sits behind him or behind her. Overdiagnosis, because this child's behavior is a little different, than the next child. So we're going to diagnose them so they can keep themselves in line and start drugging them so we can keep these kids in line. We're going to drug them. To keep the children in line, we're going to drug them. Because drugs are the answer to everything here in America. You know, we're a drug pushing society, including pushing drugs on our children. On our children. Because of overdiagnosis of ADHD. And then we have chemical exposure, which is everywhere. There's chemicals everywhere. Again, from smog to other facilities that let off fumes, factories, you name it. Chemical exposure. And it can't be denied. Chemical exposure, whether it's in the food supply or in the air, the packaging, it's everywhere. So do the best that you can to check what you're purchasing, and just do the best you can to keep your airways clean. You can always do some sort of cleanse for the adults that have been diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity. Do some sort of cleanse. Do a cleanse. Do some spring cleaning internally. So we can rid ourselves of all the chemicals that have saturated our bloodstream, saturated our muscular system, saturated our brain and how our brain functions. A cleanse or some sort of detoxification. So all these adverse synthetic chemicals can be released from the body, released. And then the body can start to adapt to what it knows as its own divine normalcy, right? So let's try to do better. And right here it says CDC, from the CDC, childhood ADD rate rises 22%. That's from the CDC. And this, again, this article is from 2010. So you can imagine what it is now. Childhood ADHD rate rises 22%. And that's from the CDC. Oh, gosh. Let's do better just with ourselves. Let's just do a little bit better. With our health, we don't have to be perfect, but let's just do a little bit better. No one has to be diagnosed with having an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, right? Having an attention deficit, not paying attention is a disorder. Not paying attention is a disorder. Oh, gosh. You know, daydreaming is a disorder. You know how children daydream in class? Daydreaming is a disorder because you're not paying attention to the teacher. It's a disorder. Passing notes to your neighbor. That's a disorder because you're not paying attention. So we can do better. Let's try to take a more active role in our children's lives. Let's have better relationships with our children, better relationships, because bad parenting was put on the table as a potential root cause of ADHD. So as parents, let's do better interacting with our children. Let's do better being more transparent with our children. And let's do better with giving them more learning moments and teachable moments versus scolding or criticism moments. So let's just do better with that. Go to my YouTube channel and subscribe as I wrap up. Go to my YouTube channels right here, The Kinetic Hour, once again. KENNETIC, The Kinetic Hour. Click thumbs up. Again, tell everyone you know to subscribe to The Kinetic Hour. Tell everyone that you know to leave comments. Leave comments. What do you think about attention deficit hyperactivity? Have you been diagnosed? Has your children been diagnosed with ADHD or ADD? How did you confront that as a parent? How did you confront that? How did your children feel about the diagnosis? How do they feel? Did you medicate your child? Did you not medicate? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings about the diagnosis of ADD and ADHD? And I'll be talking about this subject again. I'll do another series on mental health, a whole nother diagnosis. I mean, many of these diagnoses, I can do hours and hours just on anxiety alone, just on depression alone, because those seem to be the two most common of, quote, disorders. General anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, right? More people are being diagnosed as being bipolar. More people are being diagnosed as having borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder. More and more people are being diagnosed as being schizophrenic. So I can go into all of those. I'm going to talk about all of those subjects in the episodes to come. So for everyone that's watching, thank you so much. To all of you that are viewing the Kinetic Hour, again, to those on Facebook, to those on Facebook, to those on Instagram, to those on LinkedIn, thank you all. And until next time.